Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I think I'm wearing something green. And this is in case you missed American history. If you're watching this, that means you couldn't get to school today or you weren't able to log into class. And you know what? Hey, man, that's okay. Stuff happens sometimes, but at least you came here to watch this. And so that's a good thing. I hope those around you are well. I hope you're doing well. I hope that the trend of upward weather temperatures continues and that you're getting ready to finish the quarter strong. So I'm going to run you guys through what we did today. And as always, if you have any questions, please make sure and let me know. I'm here to help no matter what time you need me. That's not true. I sleep sometimes. Okay. So on the reminder front, don't forget that yesterday I gave you guys the Cold War work to do. That is going to be due Monday by midnight. That's kind of become our tradition, is the Monday by midnight. Don't forget that the quarter ends next week, Friday. That's March 26th. That gives you a week and a half, approximately 9 days, to get all your stuff taken care of. Any old work, late work, old tests, anything like that, along with the current things that we're doing, need to get in by next Friday. Also, just another reminder, I know this is late work, but if you are one of the 28 people that has not handed in your civil rights movement projects yet, that's a big grade, my friends. You need to get that handed in. That would be really, really, really good. If you have any questions about that, again, reach out. Let me know. Want to help. Want to see your stuff. I've got some really great projects, and I'm sure yours will be one of them if you don't have it done yet. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Korean War, and we're going to look at what happens in Cuba, and talk about how those factor into the Cold War. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start you guys off with a video. And so I'm going to go full screen and I'm going to go away for a few minutes while you guys watch this simple history, not an oversimplified simple history, different company, same idea. I like cartoons to teach history. I think they work. It's not ridiculously long. Remember, though, if you see any bombs, duck and cover, like we learned yesterday. All right, here we go.
The Korean War, June 25, 1950 through July 27, 1953. At the end of World War II in 1945, Korea was freed from Japanese control. North Korea was occupied by the Soviets while the South was occupied by American forces. By 1948, the country was divided in half at the 38th parallel, with the capitalist South ruled by Syngman Rhee and the communist North ruled by Kim Il-sung. The Soviet troops withdrew from Korea in 1948, and U.S. troops withdrew in 1949. However, North and South Korea, as enemies of one another, would not accept the border between them as permanent. The North Koreans attacked South Korea on June 25, 1950, advancing across the 38th parallel. Around 75,000 troops of the North Korean People's Army defeated the Republic of Korea's army with success, capturing the capital city of Seoul, then occupying the whole of South Korea except for Busan. This was a problem, as President Truman in the United States wanted to contain the spread of communism by preventing the domino effect. That is, if Korea fell, so would other countries to the ideology. South Korea appealed for support, and the United States pushed a resolution through the United Nations Security Council. The USSR did not use its veto power, as it was boycotting the council because the new communist China was not accepted. In China's seat was the pro-US Chinese nationalist government of Taiwan. An appeal was made by the Security Council for North Korea to withdraw its troops, but was ignored. As a result, approval was granted for a UN army made up of an international force of 16 nations to send help to South Korea, commanded by General Douglas MacArthur. The UN troops, composed mainly of Americans, landed in South Korea in early July, but were soon pushed back on the defense by the North Korean forces, forming a perimeter around Busan to defend the line until reinforcements arrived in August. Now that their position was strengthened, MacArthur went on the offensive. On September 15th, the U.S. Marines X-Corps launched an amphibious assault at Incheon. The North Korean troops were pushed back on the retreat over the 38th parallel, and soon Seoul was recaptured along with the whole of South Korea by the end of the month. Now, MacArthur was to go beyond the initial idea of containment. Truman, worried of a Chinese response, nevertheless approved, and UN troops moved into North Korea on October 7, 1950. On October 12, they captured Pyongyang, the North Korean capital. and then the Yalu River, which was the border with communist China. China retaliated by helping the North Koreans, sending 250,000 Chinese troops. The UN troops, overwhelmed by this new force, were pushed out of North Korea with heavy losses. By January 1951, Chinese and North Korean troops had captured Seoul. General MacArthur wanted to use the atom bomb on China and was dismissed for insubordination by President Truman, who went back to a policy of containment. In June 1951, more UN troops were sent to Korea, eventually driving the North Korean army to the 38th parallel and stabilizing the front. Now, a stalemate set in. In July, peace talks began, but a compromise could not be found. Meanwhile, fighting continued, and American pilots fought in the air against Soviet pilots using Chinese jet fighters and wearing Chinese uniforms. General Dwight D. Eisenhower took over as president in early 1953 and sought an end to the war. After 2 years of negotiation, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, at Panmunjom on the 38th parallel. A demilitarized zone was set up, which stands to this day. Subscribe and click the notification bell.
All right, so that gives you a pretty good look at it in short terms. The Korean War is often known as the Forgotten War. I think partially because it comes after World War II and because it's sandwiched in between World War II and the Vietnam War. I also think it's called the Forgotten War because there's never a peace treaty reached. It goes from 1950 to 1953, but realistically, the conflict is still there, minus the aggressive offensive movements. It's only been in the last couple of years that North Korea and South Korea have been able to successfully talk to each other and have had some positive meetings dealing with each other. Otherwise, there were years of problems. But to this day, North Korea is still a dictatorship and South Korea is still democratic. And it's still a place where American troops are today. As a matter of fact, former Marshall students, just like you, have served in the military in South Korea. So obviously a place in the world that we want to keep an eye on. But so review of that, obviously it's the first proxy war of the Cold War. Remember, we said proxy wars are these wars that don't directly involve the United States and the Soviet Union fighting against each other, even though you did see that part about the fighter jets. Interesting little sidebar there. Part of the reason I like simple history so much. You have the communist North versus the democratic South. The communist North has really good weapons because the Soviets had given them all kinds of stuff, including some pretty awesome tanks. And while we helped weaponize the South, we didn't give them any anti-tank weapons. And so that's part of the reason why the North Koreans were able to overrun the South Koreans so much. They push the South Koreans out of their own capital and into the very southeastern corner of the country around the city of Busan. At that point, the UN intervenes. Now, when I say the UN, I need you to understand that that's mostly U.S. forces. Okay, that is mostly the American Army and Marines and Navy and everybody. And when the UN intervenes, there are more and more and more U.S. forces pushed in, led by Douglas MacArthur, who is a hero of World War II. And they're able to, I would say, relatively easily push back to that 38th parallel, the line that marks off North Korea from South Korea. At that point, MacArthur got aggressive and he pushed into North Korea. He literally pushed them back in places all the way to the Chinese border. At that point, communist China wanted to support its communist friend to the south, also wanted to maybe, I don't know, gain some territory in it, who knows. But they came in force and started to push the UN back. At that point, like they said in the video, MacArthur asked to use the atom bomb. He asked to atom bomb China. Truman didn't want to get into a big war with China because he figured that would cause a direct conflict with the Soviet Union. So he said no. Things went public. They ended up in newspapers, they ended up in magazines, and Truman decided that he did not want to deal with this. And so MacArthur was let go. At that point, the fighting gets pushed back to the 38th parallel and kind of ping pongs back around that line for a little while, tennis match if you want, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Eisenhower comes in as president and basically helps negotiate an armistice, an agreement to put down your weapons. And even though there's still no peace treaty, it kind of seems like we're stuck at what's called the status quo, where you've got this area in the middle called the DMZ, or demilitarized zone, which technically is like this dividing borderline. It would be like if there was a fenced-in area with a few buildings that separated the United States from Canada, but obviously North Korea from South Korea here. Like I said, there are still American troops there. I have some great uncles, I believe, who fought in the Korean War, who were Marines, who were caught at a place called the Chosin Reservoir, where it got really cold, and the people that survived that were called the Frozen Chosen. It's an interesting war, kind of ignored by Hollywood, except for a few movies, nothing very recent. You don't see a ton of stuff on TV, but there are still some Korean War veterans out and about that you might be able to talk to about the war itself. One of the things that people don't realize about Korea is it's very hilly, very kind of mountainous, hilly terrain, and so the fighting was very unique and different. Weather became a factor many times in the war. A very, very different war from the Vietnam War, which we fought like 10 years or so later. Well, it's kind of fires up a little bit earlier, but really kind of hits its height about 10 years later. Okay. All right. The next topic I gotta get there is Cuba. Sorry, I've got Cuba covered up under here. If you know who that guy is, that's Fidel Castro. He was the communist dictator leader of Cuba for a very, very long time. Cuba, for those of you who don't know, Cuba is about 90 miles south of Florida. Over time, we obviously fought in the Spanish-American War to help get them their independence away from Spain. We had a relatively positive relationship with Cuba. Over time, there have been some different leaders in Cuba that we haven't gotten along with. And when Fidel Castro took over Cuba, we thought we were going to have a positive relationship. As a matter of fact, he maybe even had some U.S. help in getting control of the island. However, when he does get control of the island, he turns Cuba into a communist style of government. And that's really not good for us, because that means we've got, one of our big enemies, or our enemy ideology, sitting 90 miles away from us. And that's a little bit too close for comfort as far as all the American presidents during Castro's time were concerned. And Castro's time was expansive. And so there have been numerous issues with Cuba over the years. Cuba wouldn't let people leave the United States and come to America. Americans weren't really welcome in Cuba. The relationship was just really, really strained. Then when John F. Kennedy was elected president, they decided that it would be a good time to get rid of Fidel Castro. And in 1961, the government with the CIA planned not an invasion, but an assistance invasion to some Cuban rebels that wanted to overthrow Castro, and it goes wrong, really, really, really wrong. And it ends up in kind of a global humiliation for us, and it's called the Bay of Pigs invasion. But that kind of strengthens the way that Castro is viewed by the Soviets and the rest of the communist community, and it also makes him an even bigger enemy of the United States, and especially the Kennedy presidency. John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby, who was one of his members of cabinet. Now, in 1962, an American spy plane was flying over Cuba, and it spotted what looked like and were Soviet nuclear missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, in Cuba. We were like, oh, heck no, you can't have missiles that close to us. And so for about 13 days, the world got really tense. We told the Soviets that they needed to remove their missiles, or else we were going to have a massive problem. We blockaded Cuba so the Soviets couldn't get in. The president came on TV almost every night to update the situation. Grocery stores started getting mobbed for stuff. There's probably a lack of toilet paper like there was during COVID. Actually, probably canned food and things like that, because people in the 60s probably had more common sense than we did. Regardless, while all this tenseness is happening, this blockade is happening in the Atlantic Ocean, not allowing the Soviets to get more things to Cuba, negotiations are going on, and threats and negotiations, I should say. Eventually, the Soviets agree to remove their missiles from Cuba if we would remove our intercontinental ballistic missiles from Turkey, a country very close to the Soviet Union. Each side kind of claims a victory. They claim that the other side backed off. Regardless, Cuba continues to be a communist country. When Castro passes away, the relationship gets a little bit better. There's a little bit more free travel and a little bit more trade these days. But during the Cold War, Cuba was definitely an area where there was a lot of tension with the United States being so close to us. Again, that's a quick look at the Cold War, and reminder, just get your stuff done. We got that Cold War assignment due Monday. If you need any help, let me know. If you haven't handed in your civil rights project, get that done. And for some of you, make sure, I don't know how you guys get them, but check your chats, your Google chats. I sent some of you guys links to tests that you owed me on Monday, and I'm still waiting for a few of those. Guys, I know this isn't easy, but let's finish the quarter strong. Let's get as many of you guys successfully through here as we can. I want to be helpful, so please let me ask if you need me, okay? If you have any questions about anything, let me know. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.